Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Deep Dive into the Archive, where today we'll be diving into the album Wildlife by La Dispute.
La Dispute, they're a post-hardcore band from Grand Rapids, Michigan. That is important, as Grand Rapids, Michigan comes up a lot on this album. This album it's like broken up into 4 sections. Each begins with a monologue.
Monologues, or they're letters, essentially. Or they're the narrator of the story, or stories writing letters to people, or trying to.
It seems to be to one specific person, scratched out. This entire album is kind of like a dialogue really directed at this person. And it's just this release of emotions and all these feelings that the narrator is going through. It gets pretty intense, these emotions that they're going through. The narrator and Scratched Out are very obviously separated. It's never
He's scratched out. It was him the whole time.
What?
No, you said very much separated, and I was like, bro, what if they were the same?
That would be weird.
Bro, it's like Fight Club. It's like Fight Club.
Yeah, okay.
This album is Fight Club.
No, Joe.
What do you mean?
So yeah, I'm literally trying. Like they're very possibly separated because one of them died, or Scratched Out died. It's one way of interpreting. Like I said, it's never really said.
I don't necessarily know. I don't think it's that one of them died personally. I think it's just one of them left.
It does. They are somehow separated. Because of a departure. That is literally the first track, A Departure.
The only reason I say I think that Scratched Out left specifically is because on I See Everything, he says he has not gone through what the mother in that story went through, or not even close, is what he says. Which is why, to me, it's just someone left him rather than died.
It definitely seems to make more sense, given the emotional outpour, that it's someone who left rather than died. Like I said, it's never really explained. It's better that it's not explained.
I would say, I guess, more generally, this album, to me, is about dealing with trauma and figuring out how to get through it, essentially. Specifically throughout the letter tracks, I guess, or the note tracks, or the monologue tracks.
We'll call them monologues. Because one is literally called a letter, so it's kind of confusing if we call them the letter tracks.
I guess throughout the monologues, it feels like he is, I guess the word is like wallowing in his despair, rather than trying to move forward. I don't actually, specifically on a letter, he talks about like how he knows he could go out and try to like move on, essentially, but he doesn't for whatever reason. I think he actually brings up that he feels like if he tries to move on, that to him that's like forgetting what happened. And that's why I guess generally it's about facing trauma that you've experienced and trying to move on from it, or trying to figure out how to move on from it.
Dealing with tragedy is the last section of this album says, like, here's this tragedy. When it happens to me, what am I going to do? We'll get to that. I find the way that this album kind of poses that question to be very, very powerful. Difficult is because it's not a question you can answer. I mean, we'll get into it, but the answer he arrives at is you can't know until it happens, which is it is true. It's the unfortunate truth. Anyways,
fun.
I mean, it starts out a bit later than that. The first section is just like setting the scene mostly, I
don't know about that. Like, it definitely gets more depressing as it goes on.
It does. It's not a very bright album at really any point.
Yeah. So I guess after Departure is just setting up everything. It kind of just sets up that he is like absorbed with thoughts about, I guess he's kind of going through like, I guess, alienation almost. He's consumed by thoughts, basically. And all of this seems to have happened after a departure. I'd say, I guess, conceptually, it's a departure of a loved one. I guess more generally, I think the album deals with, I guess, the idea of a departure a lot more generally throughout its runtime, whether that be departure as in like just leaving your home, or say losing faith, or to, I guess, the extremes of someone dying. Loss is what I'd say sums up. We have the second track, Harder Harmonies, which kind of almost feels like a continuation of a departure. Harder Harmonies to me is like just a general like disillusionment with your current routine. I don't think that's all of it, but that's like a bit general, where he's like out of sync with the world, I'd say.
It's a lot about being isolated. I would say. Especially specifically talking about his place in like Grand Rapids, for example. Where's the line? It's like the city's got its own song, but he can't play along.
Yeah.
He sees the notes as they fly by, but always plays them wrong.
Yeah, that's kind of where I got like out of sync with, like, he's grown distant from his surroundings.
Very much. So, I think what like really hits me about the song is a line that plays off that line. And all the ones who seem to fit the best into the chorus never notice there's a song, and the ones who seem to hear it end up tortured by the chords when they fail to find a way to sing along. Sort of like extending this idea of like, this is how he feels. He is observing other people who seem to fit in and don't even really notice that they are fitting in, because it's just natural to them.
Yeah.
And the other people who like him feel isolated, feel alienated.
Yeah.
And they're trying to essentially be the ones that fit in as well, but they can't.
Yeah.
Because of whatever issues. It's kind of implied that mental health could be causing that disconnect. Joe?
Yeah, I don't have anything. Song. Yeah. I guess I'll say that I think also the instrumentation throughout the record is just really fantastic. The song is like, there's like this like almost a bounciness in a way to a lot of the instrumentation. Not in the sense of like something like Kira Kira Bonito, where it's like bouncy and fun, but like there's like the way everything is like produced or mixed, it just there's this like, it reminds me also like slap bass or something like that. Do you know?
Yeah,
you know what I mean, where it's like it feels kind of kinetic, all of the elements of the track.
These tracks definitely, a lot of them pick up the pace and move around quite a bit.
Yeah.
One thing I especially really like about the instrumentation on Harder Harmonies is that at the end, during the outro, when he's talking about how, again, he doesn't fit into the song of the city, there's like this guitar tone, I think, that comes in, and it's definitely like off tune and like noisy, and then it doesn't fit in with the melody. You see what they did there.
Whoa.
But it does sound really good, and I think it fits in quite well with the song. Yeah. There's also want to just like compliment Jordan Dreyer, their lead vocalist, for his delivery on the vocals throughout the album. He kind of grows increasingly distressed throughout the album, and he like starts out very distressed. So it's a very well the musicianship, I should say, on this album is very, very well done,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. I guess moving on to St. Paul Missionary Baptist Church Blues.
Wow.
What a catchy name.
It really is. This is apparently this is a real church near Grand Rapids.
Yeah.
And the story of the song is essentially there's this church. You used to drive by it. It was bustling community. Lots of people, people going there every Sunday doing church things. And it's now old, rundown, distant. Vines are growing on it. And he's the narrator is wondering to himself if he has essentially his life has gone the same way as the church, where he was once pretty much happy and is now old, rundown, distant, and he has this like loss of feeling, which tends to go along with mental health issues like depression.
I think there's like sort of a reoccurring theme of his own like loss of faith, that it isn't like something he's going through currently, but he's like lost faith over time essentially. I think that this definitely also, it's the most obvious example of it, but it plays into that kind of idea that he's also like a lot of the things that he previously engaged in are things that he just doesn't like care about, or he's apathetic towards now, and that specifically loss of faith comes up again on I See Everything.
Yes.
So yeah
Definitely. The church being very much a personification of that. I think personification is the right word. I hope it is. And also, just one last thing to point out about this track. The track kind of ends with, I guess, a little bit of hope. The narrator sees someone like cleaning away. There's a stained glass window that's still intact, and the narrator also sees a man like cleaning up the church. And he's kind of hoping that there's someone like that for him as well. I believe that that comes back later in the record. There's lots of time.
Literally, the next song, this comes back. There's a direct reference to it in the next track, "Edit Your Hometown," which like takes it and then kind of like it almost like flips it on its head, whereas in the previous track it's like hopeful. In "Edit Your Hometown," it's this. Is that being picked up? Sorry, there's a plane going by overhead. I don't think it's being picked up. But in St. Paul's, or on the track St. Paul's, it's very hopeful. On "Edit Your Hometown," it's flipped, where now Jordan sees himself as the man cleaning the window. And like, essentially that's what he views his life as being if he stays in his hometown forever, if he doesn't get out, essentially. Just cleaning up the sidewalk basically as an old man.
Edit Your Hometown and very much like combines a lot of the sentiments from the previous two tracks, where a narrator has like grown up, all the friends that he had have moved away, and he's lost his friends. He feels alone in his hometown. He feels out of tune with it. And it's kind of reflecting on how you're forced when you're young to make a choice to stay or go from your hometown, pretty much. And he says, and I quote, "Don't make the same mistake as me." So he very much regrets that choice.
Yeah. Run away, screaming.
Yes. Hey, if you like your hometown, nothing against you, but like, definitely wasn't the right choice for our narrator here.
Yeah. I think it has less to do, or in the song it has less to do with the hometown itself, and more so how by staying there, it leads him to grow distant as everyone like around him leaves, essentially.
Yeah. There's throughout this album, the narrator kind of just has trouble doing things, and it definitely seems like he had trouble leaving. But at the end of the day, that would have been a better choice for him.
Yeah, and this kind of like ties into another theme in the record that comes up later on about like him being scared to I guess face these like challenges in his life, essentially. So in this track he's scared to leave his hometown. There's another track where he's, I guess, reminiscing about the fear he felt when like first I guess falling in love with someone, essentially.
Yeah.
And there's also like consistently a fear of him, or he has a fear of facing his trauma.
Definitely. I mean, life is scary.
Yeah. Don't do life, kids. It's scary.
Well, speaking of not doing life, you want to talk about a letter?
Yeah.
It's about not doing life. I mean, the line that really sticks out to me from this track is "I'd shut off from everything." It's literally this track is just very much about depression and loneliness.
Yeah.
And the narrator blames himself for all of this, as you tend to do with depression. He blames himself for not being able to successfully deal with depression, despite not really having. Like, it's never just one person's struggle. Like, it's not just like, oh yeah, gonna get up and not be depressed today. 'Cause that's my choice. So
Yeah, feels. I brought it up earlier, but there's also the interesting part where he, where is it? Where's the line? Where he says, and yeah, I know I should be finding another way. I know that I should be out seeking a substitute, but just forgetting never really made sense to me. So I haven't been.
Mm-hmm.
So it's both about him like having an inability to get out of his depression, but also in general, this kind of again plays into his inability to face the trauma that he's gone through. Because to him, he perceives like moving on as forgetting everything. When I think by the end he learns that that's not really what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's one way to interpret it. Yeah. The next track, again. This is one of like the more lyric heavy tracks. Safe in the Forest, Love Song for Poor Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
This track is very much focused on what again, leaving the city, how the protagonist or the narrator hasn't left and kind of needs to leave. Yet still finds himself unable to do that.
I mean, it seems like at the end of the song he kind of does leave, actually. Because by the end he's kind of talking about just the state of his, like, it's sort of like him reflecting on it after he's left, and he's like, he's looking at the state of his hometown, specifically at the end. Because there's lines like let tongues confess the plague of joblessness, a temporary illness. Let us wave their flag from there, here, and then over and again, and let us hope for better things, though we may not ever get them. Like, it feels like at this point he actually has left, and he realizes in hindsight that kind of the state of his hometown isn't necessarily as good as he like originally thought it was. And that's like reinforced at the very end. He says, I need to leave, but swear I will carry you in me until the end. And then he says goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
It's definitely, again, this is like a more positive ending to the track. I don't interpret this as he has left, but he is come to terms with the fact that he does need to leave, and he is essentially prepared to leave. Whereas earlier, like on Harder Harmonies.
Well, because that's the thing, isn't there? I don't remember which line it is, but that at a certain point in the record, he is like driving away from it.
Yeah, so he said, it's earlier in this song, there's the point where he says he packed up, took 75 northbound to a brand new life, and waved goodbye in the rearview mirror. I don't think this is necessarily relating. I don't think this is about the narrator, though. I think this is about essentially what would happen if he were to do that. Interesting.
Because that's the thing, is there's lines later on, specifically on Edward Ben's 27 Times, where he says, and it's at the end of the song, he's like, I'm driving away now, or northbound, I think he says.
Oh, yeah. I'm leaving the city and I'm heading out to nowhere.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I guess you could definitely interpret as him, like, still having not left. But, yeah.
Yeah. Anyways.
Then I guess we have the track, The Most Beautiful Bitter Fruit.
This song's about sex.
It's about sex and worrying.
It's about a lot more than just sex.
I think it's more so about like this importance that he placed on his.
It's about, a lot of it is about like the pressure of like losing your virginity.
Yeah, well, I think that, but more so the importance he placed on just love in general, or his love as a youth, and him reflecting on it and wondering, like, should I have, basically?
Exactly.
I think there's even a point where he's specifically wondering if, like, him worrying about it was, like, worth anything, essentially. And wonders whether or not, like, it did him more trouble than it did him good, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's definitely, it's interesting when you think about how this song relates, when the letter to the person who has departed is most likely someone that he has loved in the past. It's kind of implied. And it's just wondering, essentially at the end of the track, he comes to the conclusion, like, find it a body that makes sense. Find someone that you can, truly love and be with.
Yeah. I think this definitely plays into him, like, coming to terms with that relationship and being okay that it's over.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the next line is, I've felt it, which I had always assumed meant the person that was scratched out was the person that he felt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excuse me. That's gonna, I don't know if that picked up.
What's up?
No, I burped.
Good burp.
Spotify's also not playing songs anymore. Oh, it... Spotify, how could you?
By the way, bitter fruit is a biblical reference to sex, in case you were wondering. I don't know.
Bro, what?
What?
What the fuck? That
What?
song's about sex?
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
Yeah, anyway, after that we have a poem.
Poems where it starts getting even rougher.
Yeah,
This this track it really amps up the, I guess, emotional toll of this album. It's also where we finally get the name of the album, Wildlife.
yeah.
But
There we go, the album's over now.
they said the name of the album in the album, so
Yeah. He is, to me, it's like, this track is like, he, I guess, him having to, face this trauma is like, it's growing closer for him, and he is like slowly becoming more and more terrified of it. Like, for whatever reason, he thinks it's just going to like ruin him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's the line that starts off the poem. I'm increasingly alive to every cloud up in the sky. I'm increasingly afraid it's going to rain.
Yeah.
Sort of just exposing himself to this trauma more, and that's gonna all kind of come down on him at some point.
Yeah. It's interesting because this track is like, he feels very desperate on this track. And that, I guess, desperation manifests in him trying to understand the trauma before he goes, or before it happens to him, essentially. Which like, I guess, manifests in him recounting stories about other people he who've gone through horrible pain. Or, well, I guess not necessarily other people he knows, but other stories about pain, and trying to pull something out of that to know what it's going to be like.
Those are this entire block. These next three songs are just stories.
It's the gut punch of the album.
It's something. The next track is King Park. One of the more popular Law Dispute songs for some reason.
Yeah.
It's one of also the rougher songs on the album. I believe all these three stories are based off of true stories.
Yes.
Or so they say. I don't know I think there's some debate about like Edward Benz, but I don't really care. So this
I do not care.
No. So King Park is there was a drive-by shooting in Grand Rapids. Some dude was trying to shoot some other dude, missed, and hit a kid that had nothing to do with it. The shooter runs and hides in a hotel, and the police corner him, and he shoots himself. Essentially, this track, the narrator disintegrates, kind of like leaves his body, and views all of this happen, and just reflects on death, essentially.
Yeah.
The entire time. how senseless death, how precious life is a line that really stuck out to me personally. But it's, I mean, he's also looking at his own reaction to death, but also the reactions of everybody else to the death. And just how impersonal they are to it.
That's interesting. How it's because there's very much like a contrast between because there's the people who knew the kid like personally,
yes,
and there's the funeral that he talks about. There's the response of just like people who like sort of know the kid, like they're in the neighborhood or they're from the neighborhood, and them trying to figure out like who was shot, and like just scrambling to like see what happened basically. And there's the response of the shooter who kills himself out of like guilt for what he's done. And I guess to some extent it kind of, I think that this track to some extent is him trying to understand what would happen if he killed himself.
Yes.
As depression is like a pretty big theme throughout the record, and it just feels like he's trying to understand what his death would do to the people around him, and his kind of, I guess, realization of like how terrible it is.
Yeah, definitely. I think perhaps the most powerful line in its delivery on this album is, "Can I still get into heaven if I kill myself?"
Yeah.
And the way that's framed within the context of the song is, it's rough.
Yeah.
And it sticks with you. Like, I can still hear how Jordan says that line.
Yeah. I guess another interesting part to note is there's also an emphasis on how I guess young, specifically the shooter is. He says he was only 20 years old. They called him Grandpa because he was older than the others by like a year or two. And I think he's kind of relating that I guess inability to understand the consequences of their actions to his own actions, and how when younger he doesn't really understand how his actions affect those around him, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. At the end of the day, when he's surrounded by the cops, he's worried about himself.
Yeah.
Not anything else.
Yeah. After that, we have another very cheery, fun story on the song Edward Bends 27 Times, where the song is told in like 3 different times. Because
it's kind of confusing, yeah.
He talks about, or he tells it's told from the perspective of him in the present, but then he talks about his like meeting this guy Edward Bends, and like talking with him that happened in the past, and then even further in the past, Edward Benz like recounts a story to him that's told in first person, or not first person. I'm sorry. That it's told from the perspective of Ed, like telling the story basically.
Mm-hmm. That is first person.
So it's like sort of, because I don't know, the way it's told reads third person.
It's weird.
But yeah.
Yeah. The story Edward Benz is telling is Edward Benz has a schizophrenic son, and he was taking pills and he was okay, and then Edward Benz and his wife, they got their son a house, and then their son stopped taking the pills, and then one day his wife like went to see his son, and the son like wouldn't answer the door, so Edward Benz opens the door, and his son stabs him, assumedly 27 times.
Yeah.
Edward Benz survives, the son survives, everybody survives, but it's still a very traumatic event.
Yeah. This song in particular feels like it's I mean sort of almost literal in its description of like living with trauma and finding will to live in the face of trauma, as Edward Benz is literally stabbed, and then he literally shows I guess the narrator his scars. And it's like and he I guess Edward says that the only reason why he survived was because of his daughter, or having to care for his daughter and wife. And I guess it's really just like finding reason to be in the face of this horrible like tragedy.
Yeah. It's definitely like this comes back later. The reason to be is very much focused on in the fourth and final block of the album.
Yeah.
And these three tracks are setting up those reasons to be.
Yeah. I guess that brings us to the third very cheery, fun track called I See Everything, which describes the story of a mother losing her son to cancer, who's 7 years old, I believe.
Yep. 7. And the mother is, it's told in the form of a diary that a teacher is showing her class. Like, this is the teacher's son that she lost.
Yeah.
This track is difficult. It's very difficult.
Yeah.
Because it takes you through the journey of a mother who is losing her son to cancer, and it's not shoes that are comfortable to be in, but at the end of the day, she finds the reason to go on being faith.
Yeah.
And the narrator kind of contrasts this with his own lack of faith, despite seeing the strength that this woman had because of that.
Yeah. There's very much a contrast between her strength and his like inability to get over his own trauma that is comparatively much less, essentially, and him trying to figure out how she did that, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Fuck. I guess the next and final monologue is a broken jar. The last letter.
It's interesting because a broken jar is the last monologue, but this is just like a note about the naming scheme of songs in this record. All of the monologues start with a lowercase a, and then all the rest of the songs start with uppercase letters, except for the track that follows a broken jar, which is all our bruised bodies and the whole heart shrinks. Which I don't know, this is just an interesting note. I don't know if it has any significance, but...
Well, it's interesting, because, I mean, you can argue that all of these tracks are part of these letters that he's sending.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really seem that way, because when he says, on a poem, he says it's the third letter.
Yeah.
Where it would be, I mean, it's the 8th track, so it doesn't really make sense. Or you can argue that, I guess, each letter starts with the monologue, and then the next 3 tracks are also included in that letter.
Yeah.
But, All the Bruised Body is definitely very directed at Scratched Out as well.
Yeah. It's also interesting because it kind of becomes clear on this track that this, like, he's writing stories, but he kind of is wondering, is he just like the person in the story, basically?
Mm-hmm.
Like, are these actually stories, or are these just like descriptions of his own experience, essentially? He says it very, like, directly. He says, "So which voice is it then that I've been writing this in? Is it my own or his? Has there ever been a difference between them at all? I don't know." Yeah.
Yeah. The other part of this track is the narrator talking about a broken jar. The broken jar definitely seems to be kind of a metaphor for, like, a broken relationship.
Yeah.
Seemingly the relationship with Scratched Out. Where's the line? I've been trying to repair it every single stupid day, but won't the cracks still show no matter how well it's assembled?
Yeah.
Talking about how, if a relationship has cracks in them, they don't just disappear because you want them to.
Yeah.
And then he throws all the shards away at the end.
Yeah.
That's the end of the relationship, I guess.
And then we get the song "All Our Bruised Bodies" and "The Whole Heart Shrinks," which
sorry, you can go.
No, this is like it seems directed at the listener specifically.
Yes.
Just about, like, how are you going to deal with trauma? You don't know. You have no fucking clue. Basically.
Yeah, this is the track that kind of brings it all together.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the narrator has just laid out these 3 tragedies in front of you, and he has seen how different people have coped with those situations. And he's wondering, how could I cope with something like that would happen to me? And how are you going to cope? There's the entire, like, verse 5 on this track is awful. It's where that question is essentially posed. it's just essentially life is suffering, in a sense, in that everyone will have to deal with tragedy at some point.
I just imagined you saying life is suffering is like the Joker for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Specifically Joaquin Phoenix Joker.
Thank you. I'll take that as a compliment. It's the narrator is like, yes, you will have to go through tragedy. We're all gonna have to go through tragedy, and I am terrified of that. But he kind of also assumes that everybody else is also terrified. And he wonders and is also scared of his eventual tragedy. This, for me, this song is awful. I mean, it's like the best song on the album, but like it's very difficult to listen to. Because it's, I mean, I don't know. It's just, I agree, I guess, a lot with what the questions that it poses. And how, yes.
Do you agree?
Do I agree?
Do you agree?
For the most part, yeah. Yeah.
Do you want to move on to the last track?
We can move on to the last track.
Okay. We get the final.
Again, it's a more hopeful ending.
Yeah. So the last track is "You and I in Unison," and this track feels like acceptance, basically.
Yes.
It is him kind of. I think, like, essentially this track is like him accepting that this relationship happened and it's over now, but he will still like be able to like remember the memories he has of it, and I basically tell the stories of what happened. It kind of ends with the line, "Until I die, I will sing our names in unison." Just him saying like, I will, I'll remember this and I'll tell people about what happened, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's also, I would say, a sense on this track that it's, you're not in this alone at the end of the day. That you can have someone there, whether they be physically or kind of in spirit, and they're there to help you go through tragedies. It's definitely, I would say, lots of people would probably agree that it's a lot easier to deal with tragedy with other people, with a support network. So take our protagonist's advice here. He is also, I would say the narrator is also kind of wondering if he kind of let that person go, but they're still, like I said, they are still there with him. He can still sing their names in unison.
Yeah. I think it's also him, like, basically accepting that, or it's him accepting that he won't be able to, like, be with them. But it's also, he's like, he has like the line, "Should I not just sing along?" Which is kind of just like, if I have these like warm thoughts about the relationship, that I shouldn't like forget that or hide it or anything. I'm like okay with remembering those parts. Like he's okay. He's gotten over it now.
Yeah.
So he's content with what he got out of it, basically.
Very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, this album is it's a rough one. It's rough. I don't think, despite its subject matter, I don't think I would recommend this to you if you are dealing with tragedy. Maybe find a support network first. Because I don't think this album is really one to, despite its hopeful end, it's not really one that improves mood. I definitely come away from this album sadder when I listen to it. But I don't know. I guess it depends on person to person. At the end of the day, I think the intention here, like the narrator is doing, he's having a release of emotions. So that is what you need. I don't know, maybe this can help. It's difficult. Also, please listen. Like, look up the lyrics when you listen to this album. Some of them can be, do the lyrical delivery. You might miss some vocals here and there. They're kind of important, so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to say, Joe?
Not really. I guess if I have any problems with this record, it's mainly that I do admittedly find some of the instrumentation to get like a little bit samey over time. I don't know. That's really it. Like a very minor problem.
Yeah, I can definitely see like where you're coming from there. The thing, like for me, is that narratively, I think the album gets a lot more interesting. Is the thing. So
yeah,
kind of makes up for it. But definitely like the earlier tracks, I feel like the instrumentation is far more interesting. But the later tracks are just sad. So.
All right.
Yeah.
Conclusion. Do you want to go first? Do I want to go first? Who wants to go first?
I'm gonna go. Hi. I really like this album.
Hello.
It's like I said, it's very difficult. It's very sad. However, I think at the end of the day, it's kind of reflections on tragedy, on loss, on moving on depression, etc. They're very powerful, and I guess I appreciate the message that it's displaying. I do think, well, the instrumentation is very good. Jordan Dreyer's lyricism and vocal performance, I think, is very, very, very good. I would personally give this album like a 9.5 to a 10.
Oh man. He's coming out there. Yeah. Fuck. Yeah, I agree. I think this album is really incredible, and it's a very interesting I guess look at how to deal with tragedy or grief in general, or loss, or I don't know, there's a lot of stuff going on in the record, and I think it's really fantastic. I'd give it like a 9.5 out of 10.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. hey, thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed that video, please give it a like. Maybe subscribe to the channel. You can check out our other series we got going on. If you want more reviews, we got more deep dive into the archive you can check out. You could also check out our other reviews, or anything. Please subscribe. Please. But yeah, I hope you have a wonderful day.